the neuroscience behind why chosen ones feel everything more intensely. I want to start this video by saying something that I almost never say at the beginning. I know exactly who you are right now. Not in some vague, generalized way. Not the way most spiritual content speaks to a crowd and hopes someone feels seen. I mean you, the specific version of you who found this video tonight, or this morning, or in whatever quiet moment you carved out from a life that has always felt slightly too loud, slightly too heavy, slightly too much for other people to fully understand. You feel things deeply. You always have. And for most of your life, you were told directly or indirectly that this was a problem. Maybe someone called you too sensitive. Maybe a relationship ended because your partner said you were too intense. Maybe you sat in a room full of people laughing and found yourself quietly grieving something you couldn't even name. Maybe you've spent years wondering why a piece of music can bring you to tears, why injustice feels like a physical wound in your chest, why you can walk into a room and immediately know something is wrong, even when everyone else seems fine. And maybe, and this is the one I really want you to sit with, maybe you've started to wonder if something is wrong with you. If all of this feeling, all of this depth, all of this sensitivity is actually a flaw, a glitch, an emotional dysregulation you were never able to fix. This video is for you. Not for the people who are casually curious about spirituality. For you, the one who has always sensed there was more going on beneath the surface of reality than anyone around you seemed to notice. Stay with me, because in the next 38 minutes, I'm going to show you something that most people on this planet will never understand about themselves. By the end of this video, you are going to understand, not believe, not hope, but understand exactly why you feel everything more intensely than the people around you. And I'm not going to give you a spiritual platitude and call it an answer. I'm going to take you inside the actual neuroscience, the actual psychological architecture, the literal wiring of your nervous system, and show you what makes you different at a biological level. But here's the part that is going to change everything. The thesis of this entire video, the one thing I am going to argue that almost no spiritual channel will ever tell you is this: your sensitivity is not a gift you were born with. It is a gift your suffering built. And the moment you truly understand what that means, not as a concept, but as a lived truth about your own history, the shame you have carried about how deeply you feel will begin to dissolve. Not because you'll decide to feel less, but because you will finally understand that what you've been calling your greatest wound is actually your most extraordinary instrument. Let's go. There is a story that gets told inside spiritual communities about sensitive, depth-seeking people. It goes like this. Some souls come into the world with a higher vibration. They are born with thinner veils between themselves and the unseen world. They feel more because they are more spiritually advanced. Their sensitivity is a sign of their election, their chosenness. It's a beautiful story, and it is only half true. Yes, there is real science behind sensitivity. Researchers have identified a trait called sensory processing sensitivity. What psychologist, Dr. Elaine Aron, who has studied this for decades, calls being a highly sensitive person, or HSP. Approximately 15 to 20% of the population carries this trait. It's neurological. It's real. And it does mean that your brain processes sensory information more deeply, more thoroughly, and with more cross-activation between brain regions than most people's brains do. But here's what the spiritual community almost never tells you about this. Sensory processing sensitivity is not purely innate in the way we often assume. The expression of that trait, how intensely it fires, how amplified your emotional experience becomes, is profoundly shaped by your early environment, by what happened to you, by whether the world around you, especially in your formative years, was safe or unpredictable, warm or cold, consistent or chaotic. Psychologists call this differential susceptibility. The idea is elegant and devastating in equal measure. The same nervous system that becomes profoundly attuned in a supportive environment also becomes extraordinarily, almost unbearably sensitized in a stressful one. In other words, and I want you to really hear this, the intensity of what you feel is not just who you are. It is also a record of what you survived. Think about the most sensitive people you have ever met. Think about yourself. And now ask honestly, Were the early chapters of your story ones of pure safety and ease? Or were there years, maybe many years, where you had to develop an almost supernatural awareness of the emotional states of others, where you learned to read a room not as a skill, but as a survival strategy? If you're nodding right now, stay with me, because this is where it gets truly important. The neuroscience of hypervigilance and why it feels like intuition. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you in the next section is the part most people never get to hear. Inside your brain, there is a structure called the amygdala. It's small, roughly the size and shape of an almond, and it is, among other things, the brain's primary threat detection system. It scans your environment constantly. It flags danger. It fires the alarm. In most people, the amygdala operates in the background, a mildly reactive system that activates when genuine threats appear and quiets down when the environment is safe. But in people who grew up in environments of chronic emotional unpredictability, environments where a parent's mood was the weather you had to forecast every morning, where conflict could erupt without warning, where love felt conditional, or where your emotional reality was consistently minimized, the amygdala doesn't learn to quiet down. It stays activated. It becomes, as trauma researchers like Bessel van der Kolk have documented extensively, structurally sensitized. The neural pathways that govern threat detection become so well-worn, so frequently fired, that the brain begins to treat that heightened state of alertness as its baseline. This is what we call hypervigilance. And here is the part that will make you look at your entire life differently. Hypervigilance, at the neurological level, is almost indistinguishable from what spiritual communities call intuition. Because your nervous system is running a threat detection program so sophisticated, so comprehensive, so constantly active, that you genuinely do pick up on things other people miss. You notice the micro-expression that flickers across someone's face before they compose themselves. You feel the energetic shift in a room the moment something changes. You sense the subtext beneath someone's words long before they say what they actually mean. This is not magic. This is your brain, having been trained by years of emotional unpredictability, operating exactly as designed. It learned to see everything, because missing something once cost you too much. The Jungian analyst Marion Woodman wrote beautifully about this. She described the child who grows up in an emotionally unsafe environment as developing what she called an overdeveloped antenna, a sensitivity to the subtlest vibrations in the emotional field around them. She saw this not as pathology, but as the beginning of a particular kind of wisdom, one that had to be earned through suffering before it could become a gift. I want to offer you that reframe right now, not to minimize the pain of how your sensitivity was forged, but to begin naming it accurately. What you call your intuition is real. What you call your gift is real. And it is built on a nervous system that was asked to carry far more than it should have had to carry, far sooner than it should have had to carry it. Pause here and think about your own life for a moment. When did you first learn to scan a room before you entered it? When did reading other people's emotions become automatic for you? Can you trace it back to a specific season, a specific relationship, a specific home? Why your gift became a wound, and why Jung saw this coming? Carl Jung believed that the path to wholeness was not the elimination of our darkness, but its integration. He called the rejected, hidden, painful parts of the self the shadow, not because they were evil, but because they were the parts we had been forced to push into the dark. For deeply sensitive people, the shadow often contains something unexpected. It contains rage. It contains the grief that was never permitted, the needs that were never met, the boundaries that were never allowed to exist. The version of you that simply wanted to be held, to be understood, to be told, your feelings make sense, and you are safe, here, and wasn't. Here is the psychological dynamic that traps so many sensitives in a cycle of suffering. Because you feel everything so intensely, and because many of you were in environments where intense feeling was unwelcome or even punished, you learn to do something extraordinary. You learn to feel inward, to contain your emotional experience within yourself rather than express it, to become the person who holds everyone else's emotional weight while quietly, invisibly, suffocating under your own. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, and the neuroscience is stark. Chronically suppressing emotional responses does not reduce the underlying neurological activation. The amygdala still fires. The cortisol still floods the system. The body still registers the distress. You just don't show it. Which means that all of those years of being the strong one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't make a fuss, all of those years were years in which your body absorbed emotional weight that had nowhere to go. This is why so many deeply sensitive people develop what looks like anxiety or depression in their 20s and 30s. Not because something has gone wrong, but because the system has reached its capacity. The body is speaking the language of accumulated silence. Van der Kolk's landmark work reminds us, the body keeps the score. The nervous system does not forget what the mind tries to move past. And here is where Jungian shadow work becomes not just a spiritual practice, but an actual neurological necessity. Bringing what is suppressed into conscious awareness, feeling it fully, naming it accurately, sitting with it without immediately trying to fix or transcend it, this process literally changes the brain. It reduces amygdala reactivity over time. It builds what neuroscientists call affect regulation, the capacity to feel intensely without being consumed. This is the real spiritual work. Not the bypass, not the transcendence, the descent. You were not designed to feel everything at that volume indefinitely without processing it. The sensitivity that makes you extraordinary also makes the accumulation of unfelt feeling extraordinarily dangerous to your well-being. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you next is the part most people never get to hear. Why you cannot watch suffering without physically hurting. In the 1990s, Italian neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolatti discovered something that quietly rewrote our understanding of human empathy. While studying motor activity in macaque monkeys, his team found neurons that fired not only when the monkey performed an action, but when the monkey watched another monkey perform the same action. They called these mirror neurons. And subsequent research has shown that the human brain's mirror neuron system is significantly more complex, more expansive, and more deeply integrated with emotional processing than any other species we have studied. What this means in practical terms is this: when you watch someone suffer, your brain does not merely observe the suffering, it simulates it. The same neural networks that would activate if you were experiencing that pain activate in a muted but measurable form when you witness it in another. For most people, this simulation is background noise, a flicker of discomfort, quickly metabolized. For someone with a sensitized nervous system, someone whose amygdala is already running at heightened activation, whose interoceptive pathways, the neural channels that translate internal body states into conscious feeling, are more finely calibrated, the simulation is not background noise. It is a symphony at full volume. This is why you cannot scroll through images of suffering without feeling physically ill, why someone's grief can enter your body like it is your own, why you absorb the emotional atmosphere of a room and carry it home with you without meaning to, why being around certain people leaves you exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fully repair. You are not imagining this. You are not being too sensitive. You are experiencing a genuinely different neurological reality. Cognitive scientists have a term for the difficulty many highly sensitive people have in separating their own emotional states from the emotional states of others. They call it low self-other differentiation, and it is not a weakness of character. It is a feature of an exceptionally well-developed empathic system that was never quite taught where it ended and the rest of the world began. This is, incidentally, one of the most important pieces of inner work available to you. Not to feel less, never that, but to develop what the Jungian tradition calls a strong ego container, a clear, boundaried sense of self that can hold intense feeling without dissolving into it. The goal is not to become less permeable. It is to become more rooted, so deeply anchored in your own center that you can feel the storm without becoming it. Pause here and think about your own life for a moment. How many relationships have you entered in which you quietly took on the other person's emotional reality as your primary responsibility? How many times have you left a conversation not knowing where their feelings ended and yours began? That is not a character flaw. That is an unboundaried mirror neuron system doing what it was designed to do in a life where no one ever taught you that you were allowed to put down what wasn't yours to carry. Why chosen ones often feel crazy before they feel clear. There is a moment, and many of you will know exactly what I am describing, when the world you have been living in stops making sense. Not in a dramatic cinematic way, not all at once, more like the way a photograph slowly comes into focus. Or the way you suddenly, one ordinary afternoon, notice that everything you have been doing, everything you have been trying to become, everything you have been told to want, none of it corresponds to something real inside you. Psychologists call what happens in this moment cognitive dissonance. It is the neurological tension produced when two contradictory realities are held simultaneously in the mind. The life you have constructed because it was expected of you, and the life your deepest self is quietly, insistently calling you toward. For most people, cognitive dissonance is a temporary discomfort that resolves itself by choosing the path of least resistance, by suppressing the new awareness and returning to the familiar story. But for sensitive people, it cannot be suppressed, because you feel the dissonance in your chest, in your gut, in the sleepless 3 a.m. hours when the noise of the day has quieted enough for the truth to speak. This is what most spiritual traditions call the awakening. And here is what almost no one tells you about it. It feels like falling apart before it feels like coming together. The dissolution of a false self, the self that was constructed to be acceptable, to be loved, to be safe, is experienced by the nervous system as genuine threat. Your amygdala does not know the difference between the death of a false identity and the death of an actual self. It fires the alarm all the same. This is why so many people in the early stages of spiritual awakening experience what looks and feels like anxiety, depression, dissociation, or even a kind of low-grade existential terror. They are not falling apart. They are going through the biological experience of identity dissolution, and their sensitized nervous system is registering every millimeter of it. The Jungian concept that maps most accurately onto this experience is what Jung called the individuation process, the lifelong movement toward becoming truly, authentically oneself, as distinct from the persona, the social mask that one has spent years constructing. Jung was explicit. Individuation is not comfortable. It is, he said often, a fearful opus, a great work that demands everything from you. It requires descending into your own darkness, meeting the shadow, integrating what has been rejected, and emerging not as a perfected being, but as a whole one. What spiritual communities often call choosing yourself is, at the neurological level, the extraordinarily costly process of reprogramming an identity that was built on other people's expectations. The nervous system resists this. The brain, which is fundamentally a prediction machine, experiences any departure from established pattern as danger. And yet, the people who do this work, who feel the dissonance and move toward it rather than away from it, consistently report the same thing on the other side. Not that the sensitivity decreased, but that it changed shape, that what once felt like suffering became something closer to signal, something usable, something even beautiful. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you next is the most important chapter in this entire video. Let me say the central thesis of this video one more time, because I want you to receive it fully. You do not feel everything more intensely because you are spiritually advanced. You feel everything more intensely because your nervous system was never given permission to feel safely, and it spent years building the most sophisticated emotional instrument it could in order to survive that reality. This is the part that most spiritual content gets exactly backwards. The narrative that sensitivity is purely a spiritual designation, that you were chosen before birth to carry this gift, that it was handed to you as a sign of cosmic election. This narrative, while beautiful, can inadvertently do something harmful. It can cause you to romanticize your wound without healing it. Because if your sensitivity is simply a gift you arrived with, then the pain that shaped it becomes irrelevant. Or worse, it becomes something to transcend rather than something to integrate. But here is the extraordinary truth that the neuroscience and the depth psychology together reveal. The wound and the gift are not separate things. The grief you carried before you had words for grief that grew your capacity for compassion. The loneliness of feeling misunderstood in every room you entered that grew your capacity to make others feel genuinely seen. The hypervigilance that cost you so many nights of sleep that became the intuition that has guided you, often without your knowing, through decisions that seemed inexplicable to others, but that proved, in time, to be exactly right. The sensitivity that caused you the most suffering is the same sensitivity that gives you access to dimensions of experience that most people will never touch. But, and this is the part that requires your courage, the full gift is not available to you while the wound remains unexamined. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The spiritual bypass, the attempt to claim the gift while skipping the grief, produces what looks like awakening, but is functionally an elaborate new defense mechanism. A more spiritual-sounding way of not feeling what needs to be felt. The real path is different. It is slower, it is less photogenic. It does not make for shareable content or three-step morning routines. It requires you to go back sometimes with professional support, always with radical honesty, into the places inside you that still hold the unfelt weight of what you survived. And here is what happens when you do. The nervous system, which is neuroplastic, which changes based on experience, which is never fixed, never finished, begins to regulate differently. The amygdala, no longer constantly receiving the signal that the environment is unsafe, begins to quiet, not to silence. You will always be sensitive, but to calibrate, to operate from a place of genuine attunement rather than chronic alarm. The intuition remains. The depth remains. The empathy remains. But the suffering that used to come automatically attached to all of it, that begins to lift. This is what the great mystics in every tradition were actually describing when they spoke of liberation, not the removal of feeling, the freedom to feel without being imprisoned by feeling. I want to spend this final chapter giving you something concrete, not a 5-step program, not a morning routine, but a real picture of what it looks like to live inside this level of sensitivity, when you have done enough of the inner work to be at home in it, rather than at war with it. The first shift is in how you relate to your own nervous system. You stop trying to make yourself feel less. You start learning the language your body speaks. Somatic therapists, practitioners who work at the intersection of psychology and the physical body, talk about what they call neuroception, a term coined by researcher Stephen Porges. Neuroception is your nervous system's subconscious assessment of safety or danger, happening below the threshold of conscious thought. When you begin to understand that your body is constantly making these assessments, and that many of them are running programs written in childhood, not in the present moment, you gain a new kind of agency. You can learn to offer your nervous system evidence of present moment safety through breath, through physical grounding, through conscious choice about the environments and relationships you allow yourself to inhabit. This is not escapism. This is intelligent stewardship of an extraordinary instrument. The second shift is in how you relate to other people's emotions. Remember the mirror neurons. Remember the low self-other differentiation. The work here is not to build walls. It is to build roots. To become so clear about what is yours, what genuinely originates in your own emotional experience, that you can engage fully with another person's reality without losing the thread of your own. In practice, this often involves the simple but revolutionary act of asking yourself, before and after significant emotional encounters, what am I actually feeling right now? What do I know to be true about my own state, independent of what I just absorbed from this person? That question, asked consistently, begins to build the neural pathway of self-other differentiation. It does not make you less compassionate. It makes your compassion sustainable. The third shift is in how you understand your life's purpose. Here is what I have observed across years of engaging with people who walk this path. The sensitive ones, the ones who have done the descent, who have faced their shadows, who have stopped performing ease and started telling the truth, they do not become peaceful by becoming less aware. They become peaceful by finally understanding that their awareness was always in service of something. Every person you have held steady for, every truth you spoke when it would have been easier to stay quiet, every time your depth gave someone else permission to stop pretending these were not accidents, they were your specific, irreplaceable contribution. The world does not need more people who feel nothing. It needs more people who have learned to feel everything and remain upright, who can witness darkness without being destroyed by it, who can hold grief without drowning in it. You were built for this, not by the universe handing you a destiny pre-wrapped, but by your own life, your own suffering, your own extraordinary refusal to stop feeling even when everyone around you suggested it would be easier if you did. Stay with me. We are almost at the end. And the end is the most important part. The mission you did not choose, but cannot put down. I want to speak directly to you now. Not to a category of person, to you. You have spent, I don't know if it's years or decades, carrying the weight of your own sensitivity as though it were a sentence. As though the depth of what you feel was a punishment you were assigned, or a defect you were born with, or a problem you had simply not yet solved. And along the way, you learned to apologize for it, to shrink it, to save it only for private moments, for journals no one reads, for the long drives where no one can see you feeling the full magnitude of whatever it is you're feeling. I want you to hear me when I say this, that apologizing is over now. Not because I'm telling you to be proud in some performative way, not because sensitivity has become trendy, or because some spiritual framework has handed you a flattering label, but because you now understand the actual architecture of what you carry, and it is not a flaw dressed in spiritual language. It is a genuine, neurologically grounded, psychologically coherent form of human intelligence that your life built, at great cost, in service of something the world actually needs. The neuroscience we walk through together tonight, the sensitized amygdala, the mirror neuron system, the hypervigilant nervous system that became your intuition, the cognitive dissonance of waking up inside a life that was built for someone else's comfort. None of this is abstract. This is the literal story of your nervous system, of your brain, of the body you live in. And what I want to leave you with is not a feeling of being special in the way that separates you from others. I want to leave you with a feeling of being purposeful in a way that connects you to them. Because here is the truth about what chosen ones actually do in the world. Not the mythological version, but the real one. They feel what others cannot afford to feel, and they translate it into art, into words, into the capacity to sit with someone in their darkest hour and not flinch, into the courage to name what everyone else in the room is pretending isn't there, into the quiet revolution of simply refusing to be numb in a world that profits from numbness. This is not a small thing. In a culture that has medicated, suppressed, pathologized, and commodified emotional depth for generations, the act of a human being deciding to feel fully, to do the work of integrating their wound rather than bypassing it, to remain awake and present and honest, this is one of the most radical acts available. And I know the work is not finished for you. I know there are still rooms inside you where the lights have not been turned on, still relationships that cost you more than they should, still mornings where the weight of your own perception feels like more than any one person was designed to carry. I know. But I also know this. The fact that you are here, watching a video about the neuroscience of your own depth, the fact that you did not choose numbness, even when it would have been so much easier, that tells me something about you that you may not fully see yet. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are someone who chose, against every cultural message that told you otherwise, to stay awake. And now, the work is to learn to live from that awakening, with less suffering. To let the sensitivity be what it actually is, an instrument, not a wound, and to play it with the skill that only someone who has truly paid for it is capable of. The world needs you calibrated, not comfortable. It needs your depth activated, not tranquilized. It needs you standing in the full weight of what you feel and saying clearly, this is true, this matters, and I will not pretend otherwise. If this video reached you, if something in what I said tonight found the part of you that has been waiting to hear it, I have one request. Think of one person in your life who is carrying this same weight in silence. One person who has been called too sensitive, too intense, too much. One person whose depth has been treated as a liability rather than a gift. Send them this video, not with an explanation, not with a long message, just send it. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone you love is to say without words, I see what you carry. And I found something that might help you see it too. You are not alone in this. You never were. Thank you for being here tonight. If this resonated with you, take a moment before you scroll on. Leave one word in the comments, just one word that describes what you felt during this video.